Hi, it's Lucy, and today I'm going to be doing my 2021 reading stats. I do a video like this every year. I talk about all the statistics related to my reading during the year. This year will be a little more anticlimactic because I read less books than I have in the past couple of years. So yeah, and also last year I read exactly 100 books. All the numbers worked out so evenly, so perfectly, so smoothly. Anyway, yes, I like to know the numbers around what I read. I'll be reading all the various stats I've collected out loud, and there will be charts next to me for your viewing pleasure. I am able to calculate all these stats using a reading spreadsheet. I use the one from Brock from Let's Read. I will link down his template for 2021. I think he did do a new one. I have not used a new one for the past couple of years, but the original template I got from Brock from Let's Read. I have edited mine, which is why you'll hear some statistics or things that I'm counting that may not be on that spreadsheet. It's because I added. If you want your own reading spreadsheet, check that out. There's also a bunch of other ones that have like fancier like graphics and stuff. So I'll try and link some of those down below. It's just because I've tailored this one so much already. I don't really feel like doing it again. So I haven't truly investigated a new spreadsheet in a number of years. So yes. Without further ado, let's get into the statistics. If I'm looking down at all, it's because I'm looking at my laptop, which I will be having out so that I can tell you things. Okay, I already messed up this spreadsheet, but it's fine. I fixed it. Anyway, so to start off, I have read 46 books in the year 2021. These are the genres that I read in 2021. The top genres were fantasy, where I read 16 books, contemporary, where I read 13 books, and thriller, where I read 4 books. I'm a little surprised sci-fi wasn't higher, but I did read a few books last year that could have been like joint fantasy sci-fi, and I categorized them under fantasy. Obviously, the page counts for genre correlates with the number of books I read. The genres I read the most pages from were fantasy, where I read 5,912 pages. I don't know why I said it like that. Contemporary, 4,029 pages. Thriller, I read 1,493 pages. And in total, I read 15,972 pages. So on average, I read 347 pages per book. Obviously, some books had more pages than others. Also, I ended up listening to 327.24 hours of audiobooks last year. In total, I ended up reading 40 books digitally. This includes anything I read on my e-reader and audiobooks, and 6 books physically. In the future, I'd like to change that because I own all these books. For formatting of the books that I read, 31 of them were audiobooks, the rest were not. 6 of them were ARCs, and 2 were hardcovers, 1 was a trade paperback. So there's that. And for length, I read 43 novels, 1 anthology, and 2 graphic trades. Age category wise, I read 13 adult books and 33 YA books. That's how that pie chart looks. I think last year was a lot closer to even, so that's where I'd like to be, I think. Of the books that I read that I owned either via ebook or my shelves back here, 22 of the books I read I acquired this year, and then 9 of the books I read I acquired in a previous year, and then I reread 4 books. Everything else I read I had not already acquired it. So my highest reading month was February. I read 9 books. My lowest reading month was July. No, how could I say that? My lowest reading months were September and October, where I read 0 books. My second lowest reading month was July, where I read 1 book. On average, I read 3.8 books a month. The pages per month correlates with the number of books I read per month. I'm trying to see if there are any outliers. I really don't think there are. I guess March was my second highest book-wise, but it was my highest page-wise. I read 3,314 pages in March. And then obviously I read 0 pages in September and October. So average pages per month was 1,331. I read the most pages per day in February, which feels obvious. I read 111 pages per day in February. This is an average. I didn't read every single day. My lowest was obviously, once again, September, October. On average for the year, I was reading 44 pages per day and finishing a book every 8 days, which I feel like it's still pretty good considering I literally didn't finish a book in 2 months of the year. For the year published, This is Editing Lucy replacing Filming Lucy because I realized I messed up the year's published graph because I somehow missed the fact that the year 2021 wasn't included in the graph and wasn't included in the statistics I was giving you all, so I didn't realize that my most read year for books was 2021. I read 17 books that were published in 2021, so 17 new releases. I somehow missed that fact, which really makes little sense because without that, I don't know how I added up to 46, but whatever. Anyway, enjoy the graph. Back to my face. The majority of the books that I read were 300 to 399 pages. 17 books were that length. And then the second highest majority was 400 to 499 pages. The longest book that I read was Crooked Kingdom, which was a reread for me. And the shortest book that I read was The Empress of Salt and Fortune, which was 112 pages. 16 of the books that I read were ARCs. 11 were from the library straight up, and then 5 were free. Sometimes I get finished copies from publishers, so I consider those free instead of ARCs. 4 were books that I had bought this year, and then 10 were from my shelf that I had bought in previous years. 18 books I read were a part of series, 28 books were standalones. Okay, so I started 6 series. That does include me rereading the 5th season this year because when I had reread it, I had started it even though I did end up finishing it. And then completed 7 series, and then I continued on in 5 series. For the ratings that I gave books, 22 books got 4 stars and 10 books got 3.5 stars. No books got below 2 stars because I don't know, maybe I'm just too nice. I feel like I've been saying this every time I do a stats video because I don't know when I've ever given a book 1 star. It's been so long. So 2 books got 5 stars. One of those was a reread. And then on average, I gave books 3.66 stars. So once again, I would like to have more 5 stars because, you know, I just want to. I would prefer it for me specifically. So yeah, that's where that goal that I talked about, where I want to read more books that I think I'll enjoy. Hopefully that's where this comes in this year. Now, let's talk about the contents of the books that I'm reading. So for the author, I do keep track of like demographics and stuff for the authors. Not very vaguely, but it's really just a cursory look. I'm not doing full research papers on these authors to figure out like what race or gender they are. If they state what they are, then on like Twitter or their website, I include it. If they don't, I put it in unknown in the various categories or put none. So for author gender, 40 books I read had women authors and 6 had men authors. And to go with that, for genders of the protagonists of the books I read, 34 of them had women protagonists, 5 had men protagonists, 5 had ensemble protagonists, and 1 had a non-binary protagonist, and 1 had no protagonist. For these, if it was a memoir or nonfiction otherwise, I choose the protagonist based on the demographic of the book or the author. If it's a memoir, then the gender of the protagonist is the author, and so I kind of do it like that. Also, ensemble is only for mixed groups. If there's any number of people that have different genders in the group of like protagonists, then I count it as ensemble. If all the protagonists are the same gender, I count it under that gender. 41 of the books that I read, their authors were born in the United States, and 2 were from the UK, 1 was from China, and 1 was from Japan, and 1 was from Jamaica. There's a diversity category on this spreadsheet that I use to the best of my ability. Like I said, I'm not chasing down people to figure out what they identify as or anything. Like, this category gets kind of mixed up, which is why I ended up doing like more of a deep dive, because a lot of these books end up being under the combo category, which just means it features like more than one like vector of diversity. So 13 of these books had main characters who were not white. 3 had LGBTQIA plus representation. 13 had a combination of any of the possible diversity vectors that are listed on the spreadsheet, which are more than I'm gonna say, and 14 had none. So in total, I have a separate category. The number of books that I read that had LGBTQIA plus representation was 18. Of that representation, the majority I marked under queer, which I talked about last year. Basically, if there are 2 protagonists and 1 is bisexual and 1 is a lesbian, then I mark it under queer. If the protagonist is clearly not straight, but it never says what they identify as, then I put them under queer. So queer ends up doing a lot of heavy lifting. But 3 were lesbian and 2 had bisexual representation and 1 had asexual representation. And 1 had gay representation. And then for author race, 18 of the books that I read had Black authors, and 5 had East Asian authors. 1 was South Asian, 1 was Native American, and 1 was Middle Eastern, and 20 were white. So in total, all the diversity stuff wrapped up, 29 of the books that I read were own voices. I know that a lot of people are moving away from using the term own voices. And like I said, I'm not in the business of like forcing people to find me. I'm not emailing these authors to find out what they identify as. I feel like for my own purposes in this spreadsheet, I think it's fine. So those are all the statistics I have on all the books that I read last year. Now let's talk about the books that I bought last year. This is in no way to brag or anything, just to talk about it. I don't really feel like I buy very, not nominal, because obviously some people don't buy any books in a year, and that's fine. But for booktube, I buy a nominal amount. And this is also helped because I do get ARCs and stuff from the publisher. So these are just books that I purchased with money, moolah. So in total, I bought 15 books. I bought all of them physically. They all appear on the shelf somewhere, or maybe not. Yeah, I bought all of them physically. I did not buy any ebooks last year. 11 of them were hardcover, 4 were trade paperbacks. I bought 2 sci-fi books and 4 fantasy books, 2 memoirs, and 2 thrillers. They were all novels. The majority of the books I bought were YA, and I bought 11 YA books and 4 adult books. Of the 15 books that I bought last year, I read 3 of them. In total, I spent $186.18 on the books that I bought last year. The value of the books that I read was $33.68, and on average I spent $12.41 per book because I only bought from Barnes & Noble and Target, which sells books at a little bit of a higher price, which is fine, but I did always wait till they had sales. So there's that. Based on the list price of the books that I bought, I should have spent $305.88. So I did save a bit of money by waiting for those sales. So on average I spent $12.16 per month. I bought the most books in February, because I think Target had a deal, and the second most in June because I think Target had a deal, or maybe Barnes & Noble had a deal, someone had a deal. And in February I spent $79.41, in June I spent $39.49. Those are the only months where I went over my budget, but I don't like how the spreadsheet does it because it doesn't include the carryover from the previous month when it's calculating how much money you have for that month, if that makes sense. But yes, that's the end of my reading stats for 2021. In the comments down below, let me know what was your best reading month last year, or like any stat that that is easily accessible to you, or any stat that is easily accessible to you. I would love to know. In the comments down below, also give me a graph emoji because statistics means graphs. That's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I will see you in my next video. Bye.